She started pulling away, her warmth replaced with strange silences and secretive glances. I thought it was about my body, but then came the scarf, the late-night calls, and the lies that didn't sound like lies. What I finally discovered changed everything I believed. Before continue, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. That's free and only way to support us. Thank you. My name is Ethan. I'm 26 years old, and I used to think I had this whole relationship thing figured out. You know, flowers on birthdays, surprise ice cream runs, holding hands at crosswalks, the little things. But lately, the little things have been disappearing, like socks in a washing machine. It started on a rainy Wednesday. Nothing dramatic, no thunderstorm, no soap opera-style fight. Just rain tapping against the window, while I sat on the couch, waiting for her to join me. She didn't. She stayed in the bedroom, door half closed, scrolling her phone like whatever she was reading was more important than, well, me. I told myself she was tired. She'd been working long hours, skipping meals, looking exhausted. But when I finally went in to check on her, she barely looked up. Just gave me that half-smile that felt more like a polite nod to a stranger than a hello from the person who used to run into my arms after work. The shift was small at first. Fewer calls during the day. Less laughter at my dumb jokes. That extra beat before she answered my messages. I tried not to overthink it, but if you've ever been in a relationship, you know, you feel it in your bones when someone starts pulling away. Then came the moment. The one that got stuck in my head and wouldn't let go. We were in the kitchen, and I was talking about this new burger place I wanted to try. She didn't say no. She didn't even say anything. Just glanced at me, her eyes flicking, not at my face, but down at my stomach. A quick scan. Fast enough to deny it happened, but slow enough to burn into my memory. I laughed it off in my head. Maybe she was distracted. Maybe she was thinking about something else. But later that night, lying in bed, her back to me, I couldn't stop replaying it. That glance. That silence. The way she didn't lean into me like she used to. Over the next few days, the pattern got clearer. She wasn't cold. She wasn't cruel. She was somewhere else. Her mind, her mood, her attention, all just out of reach. And every time I caught my reflection in the mirror, I started wondering if maybe the problem wasn't somewhere else at all. Maybe it was me. If she had just ignored me completely, maybe it would have been easier to understand. You know where you stand when someone slams the door in your face. But my girlfriend, Chloe, she was giving me a different kind of confusion. One day she'd barely answer my texts, the next she'd send me a random picture of her lunch with a heart emoji like everything was normal. It was the in-between that messed with my head. She didn't stop talking to me, but the conversations felt lighter, thinner, like tissue paper that could tear with the wrong question. And that's exactly how I started feeling around her, careful. We'd still see each other, but I noticed the changes in her body language. When we walked side by side, she'd sometimes keep her phone in her hand instead of lacing her fingers with mine. When I made a joke that used to make her laugh until she snorted, she'd just smile politely, the kind you give to a coworker you barely know. Then came the oddest thing, she started complimenting other people more than me. Not strangers, but our friends. She'd mention how fit someone looked, or how toned their arms were. She never used to talk like that. And every time she did, I caught myself glancing down at my own arms, remembering how I'd been skipping the gym lately because of late nights at work. I didn't want to believe it was about my body. That just felt shallow. Chloe wasn't like that, or at least I didn't think she was. When we first met, she told me she liked that I wasn't obsessed with six-packs and protein shake. We were both more into movies, late-night tacos, and lazy Sundays. But now, it was like those things had become flaws instead of quirks. Still, she'd have moments where she was completely herself again. She'd lean on my shoulder when we watched TV, she'd laugh at my impressions, she'd text me first thing in the morning. And just when I'd start to think I was imagining the distance, it would vanish, until the next time she pulled away again. It was driving me crazy. The constant switch between warmth and cold. The feeling that I was always one step away from losing her, but I didn't even know which step would make me fall. One night, I decided I was going to ask her what was going on. I rehearsed it in my head, calm, casual, no accusations. But when I finally saw her, she looked tired and stressed, and something in me hesitated. I didn't want to add more weight to her shoulders. So I didn't ask. I just sat there, nodding along to her stories, pretending I wasn't slowly building theories in my head. And the most dangerous one was starting to sound too real, that she was losing interest in me because I wasn't the same physically as when we started dating. And if that was true, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to fight for her. Or let her go. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, one of those lazy days where you don't bother changing out of sweatpants until dinner. I was in Chloe's apartment, sprawled on the couch while she was in the kitchen making tea. I could hear her voice, soft, light, but it wasn't for me. At first, I didn't even think about it. She was probably on the phone with her mom or one of her friends. But then I caught a phrase that made my stomach tighten. Something about someone letting themselves go. The words weren't sharp or mean, but they had a certain weight to them. My mind instantly started stitching possibilities together, and whether she meant me or not, I couldn't unhear it. I sat there, staring at the muted TV, barely breathing so I wouldn't miss another clue. I couldn't make out everything she was saying, but there were enough fragments to build a story in my head. Not like before. Doesn't seem to care as much. I don't know what to do. It felt like my ears were burning. A part of me wanted to walk into the kitchen right then, force her to finish those sentences in front of me. But another part, the quieter, more dangerous part, told me to stay still and listen. The call didn't last long. She came back into the living room smiling faintly, as if she'd just been talking about the weather. She handed me my tea, sat down next to me, and asked if I wanted to watch something. No sign of guilt, no awkward hesitation. And that was almost worse. Because if she'd looked nervous, I could have called her out. But she looked exactly like the Chloe I knew, warm, calm, easy. Which made me start wondering if maybe the problem wasn't her hiding things from me. Maybe the problem was in my head. Still, I couldn't shake it. Those words looped in my mind like a scratch song. Not like before. What did that even mean? Before when? Before her long work hours? Before I started skipping the gym? Before I changed? That night, lying next to her, I realized I wasn't even sure which version of her I was with anymore, the one who laughed at my terrible puns and made pancakes in the shape of hearts, or the one who spoke in quiet tones when she thought I couldn't hear. And worse, I didn't know which version of me she was still in love with. The thing about suspicion is that it doesn't just sit quietly in the corner. It paces. It taps your shoulder. It whispers in your ear when you're trying to focus on something else. And eventually, you start looking for proof, not because you want to be right, but because you're terrified you already are. That's where I found myself with Chloe. I didn't want to accuse her of anything, but I needed to know if her sudden distance had a reason. So I started testing her. It wasn't anything dramatic, just small, deliberate changes to see how she'd react. One night, I ordered us our usual pizza but swapped our half-and-half toppings for one that I knew was her favorite. Before, she'd light up when she saw it, maybe even kiss me on the cheek. This time, she just said thanks, like I'd passed her the salt. Another day, I skipped lunch and hit the gym for the first time in weeks before meeting her. I didn't expect miracles, but I wanted to see if she'd notice. She did, sort of. She glanced at me, tilted her head for a second, and then changed the subject. No comment, no tease, no, you look good. It was like she was avoiding the topic entirely, which only made me more convinced that the topic was me. I even tested the opposite, leaning into my so-called bulkiness. I wore the hoodie that clung a little too tight around my stomach, the one I usually avoided on dates. We went out for coffee, and I caught her eyes drop for the briefest second before she forced them back up to meet mine. That was all it took to confirm what I'd been fearing. But here's the thing that messed with my head: just when I thought I had her figured out, she'd swing the other way. Like the night she surprised me with tickets to a movie I'd been talking about for weeks. Or when she randomly reached over in the car and squeezed my hand, humming along to the radio like nothing was wrong. It was this constant back and forth that kept me from saying anything outright. Every cold moment was followed by a warm one, every distant glance by a flash of the Chloe I'd fallen for. It was exhausting, like trying to walk on a floor that kept changing from tile to ice without warning. And maybe that's why I didn't notice the next thing right away, a pattern I should have picked up sooner. She wasn't just pulling back from me. She was spending more time somewhere else. Or with someone else. I'd gotten used to Chloe's texts slowing down, but I hadn't realized how much her schedule had shifted until one Friday night when I called her after work. No answer. Not unusual. But then no reply for an hour. 2. By the time she finally messaged back, it was past 10, and all she said was that she'd been out. No details. No picture of the dessert she always sends when she's with friends. It was subtle at first. She'd mentioned being tired because of running errands or meeting someone for coffee. The someone never had a name. The errands never had specifics, and I was too cautious to press, partly because I didn't want to seem controlling, but mostly because I was afraid of what she might say. Still, the clues started stacking up. Her weekends were suddenly booked. Random weeknights became plans she forgot to mention. She'd dress differently too, not over the top, but enough for me to notice. The kind of outfits she used to wear when we first started dating, paired with that perfume she only used for special occasions. I told myself it could be anything. A new friend. A work project. even a family thing she didn't want to talk about. But deep down, a question was starting to form, one that was more dangerous than the getting bulky theory. Because what if this wasn't about my body at all? What if the weight I was worried about had nothing to do with the scale, and everything to do with the weight of someone else in her life? The thought made me feel two things at once, relief and dread. Relief because it meant maybe I hadn't changed so much that she couldn't see me the same way anymore. Dread because if there was someone else, no amount of gym time was going to fix it. I decided to watch more closely. Not in a creepy way, just observing. And the next time she said she was going out, I noticed her glance at her phone every few minutes, as if waiting for a message. When it buzzed, she smiled. Not the polite smile I'd been getting lately, but a genuine one, the kind that starts in the eyes. She caught me looking and quickly set her phone face down on the table. That's when I realized something I didn't want to admit. Whatever was going on, I wasn't the only thing on her mind anymore. It was supposed to be a normal Sunday morning. I'd stopped by Chloe's place with coffee and those chocolate croissants she likes, my little attempt at hitting the reset button. She didn't answer the door right away, which was unusual. When she finally did, she looked surprised. Not unhappy, just like she hadn't expected me. Her apartment smelled faintly of her perfume, but also of something else, that subtle, lingering scent you only notice when someone else has been there. The kind of thing your brain clocks before you can rationalize it away. While she was in the shower, I sat on her couch, sipping my coffee and trying not to read too much into it. But then my eyes landed on the coffee table. There was a scarf, not hers. Chloe's style is all clean lines and muted tones. This was bold, patterned, and clearly not from her closet. It could have been a friend's, sure. But it also could have been something else. I picked it up, running the fabric between my fingers, half expecting it to somehow answer all my questions. It didn't. It just made more of them. When Chloe came out, she saw me holding it. Her expression was quick, so quick most people would have missed it. But I didn't. A flicker, like a shutter snap. Then she smiled and said it belonged to a coworker who'd left it there after stopping by. Her tone was casual, but her eyes didn't quite match. And in that moment, I realized something. Even if she was telling the truth, she'd already gotten used to me doubting her. I left not long after, claiming I had things to do. But all afternoon, I kept thinking about that scarf. I kept thinking about how she'd looked at it, and how she'd looked at me. Like she was weighing what to say and what not to. The idea that this might be about my so-called bulkiness was starting to feel too small. Something else was happening here. Something I hadn't been looking for because I'd been too busy staring at myself in the mirror. And now I couldn't stop wondering if the real reason she'd been pulling away wasn't about me at all. But about someone she wasn't telling me about. Once you get it in your head that something's off, you start seeing patterns everywhere. It's like when you learn a new word and suddenly it shows up in every conversation, every book, every podcast. My new word was suspicion, and it was painted all over Chloe's life. I stopped waiting for clues to fall in my lap and started paying attention on purpose. Not in a stalking, checking her phone kind of way. I still had my pride, but I watched for details she might think I'd miss. Like the new makeup she started wearing. Chloe was never big on it before, preferring that just woke-up look she somehow pulled off without trying. Now she had this fresh, slightly sharper style, the kind you wear when you want to be noticed. Or the way she'd suddenly end phone calls if I walked into the room. She'd be smiling, laughing even, then spot me and hang up within seconds. No explanation. Just that faint, "oh, you're here," face before changing the subject. Even her excuses for being out were shifting. At first, it was all work and errands. Now it was vague plans she wouldn't name, always said with a tone that dared me to question it. One night, I decided to push just a little. We were having dinner, and I casually asked who she'd been talking to so much lately. She said no one special, a friend from college she'd reconnected with. The name she gave was a guy's name. I acted like it didn't matter, but inside, my mind was already running a marathon. I didn't want to jump straight to betrayal. I'd seen friends ruin relationships because they assumed the worst. But the way she said his name. It didn't sound casual. It sounded practiced, like she'd rehearsed saying it lightly enough to pass. I started thinking back to the scarf, to the smile at her phone, to the way she kept pulling away physically. And I realized something I hadn't wanted to before. Maybe my weight was just the easy excuse. The surface-level reason. The one she could toss out without revealing the truth. And if that was the case, then I had two problems. One was the changes in my own reflection. The other was the reflection of me I saw in her eyes, smaller, dimmer, like she'd already decided I wasn't the same man she fell for. I knew I couldn't keep playing this guessing game. The only way forward was to get real answers. And the closer I got to looking for them, the more I felt like I was walking toward a door I might not want to open. It happened faster than I thought it would. One minute, we were sitting in her living room, the quiet hum of the ceiling fan filling the space between us. The next, my patience snapped like a worn-out shoelace. I hadn't planned to do it that night. I'd promised myself I'd pick the right moment, be calm, keep things measured. But there's nothing calm about watching the person you love drift out of reach while pretending nothing's wrong. I told her I'd been feeling the distance. I told her I noticed the changes, the shorter texts, the sudden busy nights, the way she barely touched me anymore. I didn't accuse, but my words were sharp enough to make her flinch. She didn't deny it. That hurt more than anything she could have said. Instead, she sighed, looking at me like someone deciding whether to tell the truth or keep the peace. When she finally spoke, it was slow, almost careful. She said I'd changed. Not just physically, but in other ways. She said I didn't have the same energy anymore, that I seemed heavier in spirit, not just in body. I felt that in my chest. It wasn't a clean cut, it was a dull blade dragged over skin. She didn't say she didn't love me. She didn't say she was seeing someone else. But she also didn't say she wanted to fix things. I asked about the scarf. About the guy from college. About the calls she cut short when I walked in. She swore it was innocent, that I was overthinking, that she still cared. But her tone had that distant, careful quality again, the one that made me feel like I was just another obligation on her list. I told her if there was something I needed to know, I'd rather hear it now than later. She just looked at me, and for a split second, her eyes softened, like she almost wanted to spill something she'd been holding in. But then she blinked and the moment was gone. We ended the night in an uneasy truce. No raised voices, no dramatic exits, just two people sitting in the same room with miles between them. And as I walked out her door, I knew one thing. Whatever truth she wasn't telling me, it was bigger than my weight, bigger than the scarf, bigger than anything I'd been imagining. I just didn't know if I was ready to hear it. I didn't go looking for the truth that night. I wasn't ready. But sometimes, the truth doesn't wait for you to be ready, it just shows up, uninvited, and sits in the middle of your living room. It was a Wednesday. I'd just gotten home from work when my phone buzzed. A message from Chloe. Can we talk? No emoji, no hey, just those 3 words. My stomach dropped. She came over, and from the way she stood in the doorway, I knew this wasn't going to be one of those light, laugh-it-off talks. She sat down, hands clasped, eyes fixed on some spot on the floor between us. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. She admitted she'd been avoiding me, but not for the reason I'd been obsessing over. It wasn't about the extra pounds, the skipped gym sessions, or the pizza night. It was about something I hadn't seen coming at all. She told me she'd been dealing with something heavy. Not another person, but another kind of presence in her life. Her father's health had been declining, and she'd been making trips to see him. The scarf? It was his caretaker's. The guy from college? A family friend who'd been helping her navigate the mess. She said she didn't tell me because she didn't want to burden me when she felt I was already dealing with my own struggles. She noticed I'd been tired, stressed, and carrying myself differently. She thought if she pulled back, I wouldn't feel the weight of her problems on top of my own. And that's when it hit me. All this time, I'd been looking in the mirror, thinking the only weight I was carrying was on my body. But the real weight, the one that was changing me, was invisible. It was the constant second-guessing, the sleepless nights, the fear of losing her. The silence between us in that moment was different than before. It wasn't cold, it wasn't distant, it was just full. Full of things we'd both been holding in. She apologized for letting me think it was about my looks. I apologized for assuming the worst. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. Even with the truth out, we couldn't rewind to before. Too much had been unsaid for too long. And that's when I realized the truth can free you, but it can also make you see how far apart you've drifted, even when you're sitting inches away. We didn't break up that night. There was no shouting, no slamming doors, no dramatic storming out into the rain. Instead, we sat there on the couch for hours, talking about everything we should have said weeks ago. It was strange, I'd spent so long building up this idea in my head that she was judging me for how I looked, for how I'd changed physically. And now, with the truth out, I felt both lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because the fear of her secretly wanting someone else was gone. Heavier because the real reason was so much more complicated than anything I'd imagined. We agreed to try again. To be more open. To stop making guesses about what the other person was thinking. But walking her to the door that night, I couldn't shake the thought that trust, once cracked, never feels exactly the same again, no matter how carefully you try to glue it back together. In the weeks that followed, I hit the gym again, not because she asked me to, but because I wanted to feel strong in my own skin. I started talking to her more about what was going on in my head, even the stuff I thought sounded dumb. And she started letting me in on her world, the messy, emotional, real parts I'd been shut out from before. We weren't perfect. We still had moments where we misread each other, still stumbled over old habit. But I learned something important: most of the weight we carry in relationships isn't physical. It's the quiet assumptions, the unspoken fears, the half-finished sentences. And if you don't put those down, they'll crush you long before any number on a scale does. Looking back, I realized the version of me that thought this was only about getting bulky was a version that didn't understand how fragile connection can be. Now I do. And maybe that's the real weight I've lost. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. That's free and only way to support us. Thank you.